Hey guys, Gemma from ASD Rocks. Little croak in my voice this morning, obviously, after letting off some steam last night. Although I will say, guys, please remember, buyer beware. If you do suffer from anxiety, like I do, alcohol actually is like your greatest enemy, because although it relieves the tension for the moment, the next day is like twice as bad. So do remember that alcohol is never the answer, and I was just out with some friends, so drink responsibly. I want to talk today about flapping. It's a form of stimming, and we see a lot of kids do it, and there are a lot of different forms of flapping. But there's your visual stimming flapping, but generally that physical action of flapping. And I want to talk specifically about what it does for the child, because Bo was a flapper, and I used to stop him flapping the same way I used to stop him toe walking. So once he was finally capable of comprehension, because obviously that is a massive step. You can't tell a kid to stop doing something unless they understand you. So obviously he was older at this stage. But I went to a professional, my true and wonderful psychiatrist, Dr. Richard Eisenmeyer, the, I believe, world famous, but definitely Australia famous autism psychiatrist at the ASD clinic. And I discussed Bo's flapping. And what I learned was huge. And I will never ever stop a child from flapping again. The best and only way really to explain the release that flapping gives a child is that it is similar to the release that you get from masturbation and an orgasm. It's, I'm not talking about the physical joy of it. I'm talking about the release, the tension release. And I think guys will understand that actually more than women will understand that. But just how it feels to release the tension through that physical flap. Obviously it isn't a sexual act for them. I'm simply trying to express the magnitude of the physical release of doing that action. Now, when these anxieties, when these feelings and all these senses build up, as we know, our children are very hypersensitive to a lot of different stimuli. When these sensitivities build up, sometimes the only way to release that is to flap. And flapping can be controlled rather than stopped. Once I really understood what it did for my child, I learned to control it in such a way where I would explain and set up a process where he could do that in a private environment. So, why? Not because it's inappropriate to flap in public, but let's face it, it draws attention. And, depending on where you are in your journey with autism and how you feel about your child with autism, for me, we weren't ASD rocks for a long time. I was really conscious of people looking and judging my child. I was, really sort of, I don't want to use the word embarrassed, but it's probably the best word I can use if I'm going to be 100% honest with you. So So setting him up in an environment where he could flap, and he could do this tension release, but not necessarily in a public forum, was really good for both of us. There was a story that was once relayed to me about a woman who was a very successful lawyer, autistic woman, very successful lawyer, and she was a flapper. And if she'd had a really, really hard day at work, she would go home and she would sit in her room, she'd close herself in her bedroom, and she would flap for a good half hour and just release all of that tension that was built up in her from her hard day as a criminal lawyer. The story also goes that if she was in the middle of a really tough case in court, she would use her breaks, because there are obviously breaks during court cases, and she would lock herself in the bathroom and she would go and flap and just release the tension that was built up. So I want you to really reassess what you think of your child and their flapping, because if we can understand better what it does for them, instead of stopping it, if we can teach them to do these things in appropriate environments and still get the benefits of what these things do for us, then that's a hugely mutually beneficial agreement. You're coming to this it's this symbiosis between wanting to have a kid that can function and process in the world similar to a typical kid who doesn't walk around flapping in the middle of a supermarket or those sorts of things. So just remember that a lot of the symptoms, the stimming, the flapping, these sorts of things, they're a result of something, and it's cause and effect, and they actually serve a purpose. So after I found this out, I've never ever stopped Bo from flapping again. He's actually grown out of it a fair bit, but I've never stopped him flapping again, understanding what it does for him. So try to come to a mutually beneficial agreement. Understand that flapping is a huge release for these kids and adults, and see if you can't change your mindset about that. So hopefully this has really helped your understanding of your child or of someone else's child. It's a really good thing, I think, for the general public to know and understand, because people do judge, especially with a physical act like flapping in the middle of a supermarket. People don't understand what it's about. So I think it's really beneficial for this to be shared among our community that don't have ASD kids, so that we can better understand and tolerate these actions within our ASD kids and community, and understand that the flapping may very well be, for a person that doesn't live with ASD in their life, flapping may very well be the person's ability to stop a meltdown. So if you see a kid at a supermarket flapping away, don't judge, just think that's awesome. That kid is controlling their emotions and their environment to the point where they're not going to have a meltdown in this stressful environment. All right, guys, once again, ASD rocks.